This video will show you how Episode 2, or the reaction to the blood and cheese incident, played out in the books. The Dance of the Dragons entered a new stage after the death of Lucerys Velaryon in the Stormlands and the murder of Prince Jaehaerys before his mother's eyes in the Red Keep. For both the Blacks and the Greens, blood called to blood for vengeance. And all across the realm, lords called their banners and armies gathered and began to march. This is why it was so crucial for the Maesters to start this cycle of violence at Storm's End. Otherwise, the conflict wouldn't have escalated with blood and cheese, and a peaceful resolution could have prevented the Targaryens from turning on themselves. Yet it must not be thought that the Green Council was sitting idle. Sir Otto Hightower had been busy as well, winning over lords, hiring sellswords, strengthening the defences of King's Landing, and assiduously seeking after other alliances. After the rejection of Grand Maester Orwell's peace overtures, the Hand redoubled his efforts, dispatching ravens to Winterfell and the Eyrie, to Riverrun, White Harbour, Gulltown, Bitterbridge, Fair Isle, and 100 other keeps and castles. Riders galloped through the night to holdings closer to hand to summon their lords and ladies to court to do fealty to King Aegon. Sir Otto also reached out to Dorne, whose ruling prince, Corin Martell, had once warred against Prince Daemon in the Stepstones, but Prince Corin spurned his offer. "Dorne has danced with dragons before," he said. "I would sooner sleep with scorpions." It also probably helps that Daemon has a fearsome reputation throughout all of Westeros. Yet Sir Otto was losing the trust of his king, who mistook his efforts for inaction and his caution for cowardice. Septon Eustace tells us of one occasion when Aegon entered the Tower of the Hand and found Sir Otto writing another letter, whereupon he knocked the inkpot into his grandsire's lap, declaring, "Thrones are won with swords, not quills. Spill blood, not ink." The fall of Harrenhal to Prince Daemon came as a great shock to his grace, Munkin tells us. Until that moment, Aegon II had believed his half-sister's cause to be hopeless. Harrenhal left his grace feeling vulnerable for the first time. The subsequent defeats at the Burning Mill and Stonehenge came as further blows and made the king realize that his situation was more perilous than it had seemed. Again, Harrenhal is so strategic because it threatens King's Landing, and any army hoping to march on or towards the capital must first take Harrenhal to secure its flank. These fears deepened as ravens returned from the Reach, where the Greens had believed themselves strongest. House Hightower and Oldtown were solidly behind King Aegon, and his grace had the Arbor too. But elsewhere in the south, other lords were declaring for Rhaenyra. Amongst them, Lord Costane of Three Towers, Lord Mullendore of Uplands, Lord Tarly of Horn Hill, Samwell Tarly's house, Lord Rowan of Golden Grove, and Lord Grim of Greyshield. Loudest amongst these traitors was Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Lyman's heir, who was demanding the release of his grandsire from the dungeon, where most believed the former Master of Coin to be confined. Faced with such a clamour from their own bannermen, the Castellan, steward, and mother of the young Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, acting as regents for the boy, suddenly thought better of their support for King Aegon and decided House Tyrell would take no part in this struggle. This is akin to Lysa keeping the Vale out of the conflict during the War of the Five Kings, which is always a smart decision since you get to come in at the end and be on the winning side. King Aegon began to drown his fears in strong wine, Septon Eustace tells us. Sir Otto sent word to his nephew, Lord Ormond Hightower, beseeching him to use the power of Oldtown to put down this rash of rebellions in the Reach. Other blows followed: the Vale, White Harbour, Winterfell, the Blackwoods, and the other river lords streamed toward Harrenhal and Prince Daemon's banners. The sea snake's fleets closed Blackwater Bay, and every morning King Aegon had merchants whining at him. His Grace had no answer for their complaints beyond another cup of strong wine. "Do something," he demanded of Sir Otto. This is the problem with having the strongest but fewer dragons compared to the Blacks. Rhaenyra's side can take the initiative, whereas the Greens have to consolidate their power. The Hand assured him that something was being done. He had hatched a plan to break the Valyrian blockade. One of the chief pillars of support for Rhaenyra's claim was her consort, yet Prince Daemon represented one of her greatest weaknesses as well. The prince had made more foes than friends during the course of his adventures. Sir Otto Hightower, who had been amongst the first of those foes, reached across the narrow sea to another of the prince's enemies, the Kingdom of the Three Daughters. By itself, the royal fleet lacked the strength to break the sea snake's chokehold on the gullet, and King Aegon's overtures to Dalton Greyjoy of Pike had thus far failed to win the Iron Islands to his side. The combined fleets of Tyrosh, Lys, and Mia would be more than a match for the Valyrians. However, Sir Otto sent word to the Magisters, promising exclusive trading rights at King's Landing if they would clear the gullet of the sea snake's ships and open the sea lanes once again. To add savour to the stew, he also promised to cede the stepstones to the Three Daughters, though in truth the Iron Throne had never claimed those isles. The Triarchy was never quick to move, however. Otto is right that this is a good tactic, but it lacks the urgency that is required in winning a war quickly. Lacking a true king, all important decisions in this three-headed kingdom were decided by the High Council. 11 magisters from each city made up its membership, every man of them intent on demonstrating his own wisdom, shrewdness, and importance, and winning every possible advantage for his own city. Grand Maester Graydon, who wrote the definitive history of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters 50 years later, described it as 33 horses, each pulling in his own direction. Even issues as timely as war, peace, and alliance were subject to endless debate, and the High Council was not even in session when Sir Otto's envoys arrived. The delay did not sit well with the young king. Aegon II had run short of patience with his grandfather's provocations, though his mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, spoke up in Sir Otto's defence. His Grace turned a deaf ear to her pleading. Summoning Sir Otto to the throne room, he tore the chain of office from his neck and tossed it to Sir Criston Cole. "My new hand is a steel fist," he boasted. "We are done with writing letters." Sir Criston wasted no time in proving his mettle. Sir Criston was the right man to lead Aegon's armies, but not to run his war campaign, since he has no strategic vision to defeat Rhaenyra except by winning battles. But like with Robb Stark, you can win every battle and still lose the war. King Aegon also desired to avenge the murder of his heir by blood and cheese by means of an attack on Dragonstone, descending on the island citadel on Dragonback to seize or slay his half-sister and her bastard sons. It took all of the Green Council to dissuade him. Sir Criston Cole urged a different course. The pretender princess had made use of stealth and treachery to kill Prince Jaehaerys, Cole said. "Let them do the same. We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin," he told the king. The instrument the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard chose for the king's vengeance was his sworn brother, Sir Arryk Cargyle. Sir Arryk was intimately familiar with the ancient seat of House Targaryen, having visited there often during the reign of King Viserys. Many fishermen still plied the waters of Blackwater Bay, for Dragonstone depended on the sea for sustenance. It would be a simple thing to deliver Cargyle to the fishing village under the castle. From there, he could make his own way to the Queen, and Sir Arryk and his brother, Sir Eric, were twins, identical in all respects. Not even their fellows of the Kingsguard could tell the two apart, both Mushroom and Septon Eustace assert. Once clad in white, Sir Eric should be able to move freely about Dragonstone, so Kristen suggested. Any guards who chanced to encounter him would surely mistake him for his brother. Sir Eric did not undertake this mission happily. Indeed, Septon Eustace tells us, the troubled knight visited the Red's Keep Sept on the night he was to sail, to pray for forgiveness to our mother above. Yet as a Kingsguard, sworn to obey king and commander, he had no choice in honour but to make his way to Dragonstone, clad in the salt-stained garb of a simple fisherman. The true purpose of Sir Eric's mission remains a matter of some contention. Grand Maester Munkin tells us that Cargyle had been commanded to slay Rhaenyra, putting an end to her rebellion at a stroke, whilst Mushroom insists that her sons were Cargyle's prey, that Aegon II wished to wash out the blood of his murdered son with that of his bastard nephews, Jaehaerys and Joffrey, Strong. Sir Eric came ashore without hindrance, donned his armour and white cloak, and had no trouble gaining entrance to the castle in the guise of his twin brother, just as Criston Cole had planned. Deep in the heart of Dragonstone, however, as he was making his way to the royal apartments, the gods brought him face to face with Sir Eric himself, who knew at once what his brother's presence meant. The singers tell us that Sir Eric said, "I love you, brother," as he unsheathed his blade, and that Sir Eric replied, "And I you, brother," as he drew his own. The twins battled for the best part of an hour, Grand Maester Munkin says. The clash of steel on steel woke half of the Queen's court, but the onlookers could only stand by helplessly and watch, for no man there could tell which brother was which. In the end, Sir Eric and Sir Eric dealt each other mortal wounds and died in one another's arms, with tears upon their cheeks. Mushroom's account is shorter, saltier, and altogether nastier. The fight lasted only moments, our fool says. There were no declarations of brotherly love. Each Cargyle denounced the other as a traitor as they clashed. Sir Eric, standing above his twin on the spiral steps, struck his first mortal blow, a savage downward cut that nigh took his brother's sword arm off at the shoulder. But as he collapsed, Sir Eric grasped his slayer's white cloak and pulled him close enough to drive a dagger deep into his belly. Sir Eric was dead before the first guards arrived, but Sir Eric took 4 days to die of his gut wound, screaming in horrible pain and cursing his traitor brother all the while. For obvious reasons, singers and storytellers have shown a marked preference for the tale as told by Munkin. Maesters and other scholars must make their own determination as to which version is more likely. All that Septon Eustace says upon the matter is that Cargyle twins slew each other, and there we must leave it. Meanwhile, in the north, finally Vermax carried Jaehaerys Valyrion to Winterfell to treat with its formidable young lord, Cregan Stark. In the fullness of time, Cregan Stark would become known as the Old Man of the North. But the Lord of Winterfell was but 21 when Prince Jaehaerys came to him in 129 AC. Cregan had come into his lordship at 13 upon the death of his father, Lord Rickon, in 121 AC. During his minority, his uncle Bernard had ruled the north as regent, but in 124 AC, Cregan turned 16, only to find his uncle slow to surrender his power. Relations between the two grew strained as the young lord chafed under the limits imposed upon him by his father's brother. Finally, in 126 AC, Cregan Stark rose up, imprisoned Bernard and his 3 sons, and took the rule of the north into his own hands. So, Cregan Stark isn't a Ned Stark clone. He is more like Ned's older brother, Brandon, who was initially promised to Catelyn before riding off to King's Landing, demanding the return of his sister, only to be horrifically killed by the Mad King. People often called Brandon the Wild Wolf. Soon after, he wed Lady Ara Nori, a beloved companion since childhood, only to have her die in 128 AC whilst giving birth to a son and heir, whom Cregan named Rickon after his father. autumn was well advanced when the Prince of Dragonstone came to Winterfell. The snows lay deep upon the ground, a cold wind was howling from the north, and Lord Stark was in the midst of his preparations for the coming winter. Yet he gave Jaehaerys a warm welcome. Snow and ice and cold made Vermax ill-tempered, it is said, so the prince did not linger long amongst the Northmen, but many a curious tale come out of that short sojourn. Munkhin's true telling says that Cregan and Jaehaerys took a liking to each other, for the boy prince reminded the Lord of Winterfell of his own younger brother who had died 10 years before. They drank together, hunted together, trained together, and swore an oath of brotherhood, sealed in blood. This seems more credible than Septon Eustace's version, wherein the prince spends most of his visits attempting to persuade Lord Cregan to give up his false gods and accept the worship of the Seven. But we turn to Mushroom to find the tales other chronicles omit, nor does he fail us now. His account introduces a young maiden, or wolf girl as he dubs her, with the name of Sarah Snow. So this girl is probably meant to be a bit of a Lyanna clone, which might make Jace the Rhaegar to her Lyanna to showcase history repeating itself with the dragon and the wolf falling in love, despite not being able to be together. So mitten was Prince Jaehaerys with this creature, a bastard daughter of the late Lord Rickon Stark, that he lay with her of a night. On learning that his guest had claimed the maidenhead of his bastard sister, Lord Cregan became most wroth, and only softened when Sarah Snow told him that the prince had taken her for his wife. They had spoken their vows in Winterfell's own godswood before a heart tree, and only then had she given herself to him, wrapped in furs amidst the snows as the old gods looked on. This makes for a charming story, to be sure, but as with many of Mushroom's fables, it seems to partake more of a fool's feathered imaginings than of historical truth. Jaehaerys Valyrion had been betrothed to his cousin Baela since he was 4 and she was 2, and from all we know of his character, it seems most unlikely that he would break such a solemn agreement to protect the uncertain virtue of some half-wild, unwashed northern bastard. If ever lived a Sarah Snow, and if indeed the Prince of Dragonstone perchance to dally with her, that is no more than other princes have done in the past, and will do on the morrow. But to talk of marriage is preposterous. So because the Fire and Blood text pushes so hard against this union, it might make it slightly more plausible that it did happen. Mushroom also claims that Vermax left a clutch of dragon's eggs at Winterfell, which is equally absurd. Whilst it is true that determining the sex of a living dragon is a nigh on impossible task, no other source mentions Vermax producing so much as a single egg, so it must be assumed that he was male. Septon Barth's speculation that the dragon changes sex at need, being as mutable as flame, is too ludicrous to consider. This we do know. Cregan Stark and Jaehaerys Valyrion reached an accord, and signed and sealed an agreement that Grand Maester Munkhin calls the Pact of Ice and Fire, in his true telling. Like many such pacts, it was to be sealed with a marriage. Lord Cregan's son, Rickon, was a year old. Prince Jaehaerys was as yet unmarried and childless, but it was assumed that he would sire children of his own once his mother sat the Iron Throne. Under the terms of the pact, the prince's firstborn daughter would be sent north at the age of 7 to be fostered at Winterfell until such a time as she was old enough to marry Lord Cregan's heir. When the Prince of Dragonstone took his dragon back into the cold autumn sky, he did so with the knowledge that he had won 3 powerful lords and all their bannermen for his mother. So it looks like the show is expanding on this pact of ice and fire with a visit to the Wall, which is maybe what really happened in the books. But because of limited sources, there was no record of Jace visiting the Wall. And when you get the chance, check out our Game of Thrones inspired choose your own adventure game here on YouTube by clicking the video link on the screen right now.